It's a John le Carre spy novel. Actually, it's a John le Carre novel meets one of those golden films about the Olympics like Chariots of Fire. It's a tale of dirty, sordid intrigue, potential criminal corruption, and danger in the world of sporting beauty. Welcome to Crime Waves. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Crime Waves. My name is Declan Hill. I'm an associate professor of investigations at the University of New Haven. And each week, along with my students, and this week it's Eric Krebs and Erin Griffin, we examine the world of crime, corruption, and forensic science. And my particular passion are those things, organized crime and corruption, in sport. And this week, we're looking at the massive scandal around the state-sponsored Russian doping regime. That's where the government and effectively most of their sporting apparatus was forcing many of their top athletes to dope. And not only were they making many of their top athletes in many of their sports dope, they were also operating a criminal extortion scheme where an athlete, if facing a doping suspension, would pay the Russian and top world track officials a bribe, and the doping problem would go away. Now, the interview today is with the man at the very center of this scandal. He's a gentle, courageous person with an iron will and a firm moral compass. Vitaly Stepnov was a Russian anti-doping official. He met a beautiful track star. They went out on a date, and in the middle of that date, she turns to him and says, effectively, you do know that everything you do is nonsense. We're all doping. All the athletes are doping, and your bosses are the guys who lead that doping programs. Now, we're going to pick up the conversation with him as he and his now wife begin to discuss about what they were going to do about this issue. You'll hear us talk about the IOC. That's the International Olympic Committee. You'll hear us talk about WADA. That's the organization who's in charge of making sure that all Olympic sports are dope-free. And their name is World Anti-Doping Association. And underneath them, in each country, are NADAs. Those are the National Anti-Doping Associations. So pretty much every sporting country in the world has their own national association in charge of anti-doping. Except, as you'll hear, the Russian Association was for years systemically cheating and defrauding the system. Vitaly and his extraordinary wife exposed them, and they're now living in hiding from any possible revenge. This is a Crime Wave special, a feature interview with Vitaly Stepnov.
So we sit in the car, we start talking. I'm enthusiastic about what I'm doing at my work, how we are as an organization, and I'm part of it, trying to fight doping and making sure that athletes compete on a level field. There is no cheating, no doping. And, at one point, she basically just told me, just shut up and you're an idiot. And the Russian anti-doping agency helps us dope, and the main idea for any Russian track and field athlete is to win international competitions. So you can talk about Russia being a super sports power.
Well, had you any idea of this before she opened her mouth on your first date and said, "You're an idiot"?
The Russian anti-doping agency was created in the beginning of 2008. It's my understanding that it was created because Sochi Olympics were awarded in 2007. So a country as big as Russia had to have their own anti-doping agency according to the World Anti-Doping Code. So I was one of the people being hired by the newly created organization. From the beginning, I saw that We have many problems, a lot of problems. People within Russia are just used to fake doping controls. And for the first, I'd say, year and a half before I met my wife to be, I was thinking that I'm a part of the team that's there to see those problems, to adjust it, and to make things better. But she kind of opened my eyes, and
at that moment, Vitaly, you thought Rusada were the good guys in a very difficult field. People were doping all around you, but Rusada, your organization, were the good guys. So when she said that on that date, you didn't know what she was talking about. What was your reaction?
Well, I wouldn't say we were the good guys. I mean, we were never really welcomed, unless you did what the sports federations, national governing sports national governing bodies wanted you to do at doping controls, which basically test only clean athletes.
Yes.
And if you were trying to work according to the WADA code, then you were not really welcomed. But again, I was under the impression that I'm there, and we are slowly getting things, fixing things, and getting it better. But like she said, there are a lot of things you're not seeing, and the reality is, at least in track and field, in athletics, that all the runners she knows, everybody is doping.
And they're doping with the help of your bosses, the people that you think are the good guys.
Yes, with the help of the Russian anti-doping agency.
So you're sitting in the car with this beautiful woman that you're beginning to fall in love with, and she says this. It's got to rock your world, Vitaly. Like, what do you do? What do you say at those moments?
Well, the date is not going great. There is not a lot of connection between the two of us. But, things are not perfect in this world. So, it's, like you said, I like the girl.
Mm-hmm.
I still don't clearly know why. And why we connected the way we connected, but so I
so the two of you, yeah, and I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. That's not the job, and I don't want to go into uncomfortable emotions, because I know it was a difficult time for you guys. But at one point, you guys decided to do something extraordinary. You started in a really your own tale of investigations, really opening up that. What did you do? How did you do that?
Well, you kind of gone through some steps to get to that point, but
okay, please tell me.
Well, we have a first date, we get married. 2 months later, 5 months later, I started informing on my wife about her doping to the World Anti-Doping Agency, which tells you how good of a husband I am.
Okay. Wow.
And yes, how how easy things were between us. I was stubborn. She was stubborn. She completely believed that she's doing something that everybody is doing, and all I saw was this. World Anti-Doping Code that supposedly all athletes follow, and in the middle of it there was a marriage. But then for a few more years there has been a big conflict between the two of us, which it got to a point where both of us decided that it's better not to talk about this issue. But at the same time, behind the scenes, there are also international sports organizations that, unlike Russian anti-doping organizations and sports organizations, I believe they were trying to do some things right, not everything, but some things right. So they are catching some of the athletes. And my wife at one point becomes one of these athletes. She had abnormal blood passport values, which meant that she didn't have a positive test.
Okay.
but she had abnormalities in her blood over the period of time. And she is informed by the International Athletics Federation at that time that she might be sanctioned. If she agrees to the sanction, that would be a 2-year ban. If she doesn't agree to it and she wants to fight it, it would be a 4-year ban, most likely. In this cases, in Russia, mostly all athletes, they just agree to the ban, or they just decide to fight it, and they say it's all politics. It's an international, English
Propaganda, Cold
yes,
War.
in English speaking people are just afraid of Russians, and that's how they're getting rid of us. But there is no doping going on within the Russian national team. And that's when she had to make a decision whether she follows one of these two paths or she can take a separate path, understanding that according to the WADA code, if you get sanctioned the second time, most likely it's at least 8-year ban or a lifetime ban. So that's what she's facing if she keeps lying. And because she knew that I'm, anti-doping official, and over the past 3 years, I've proved that I can be stubborn enough not to put marriage on ahead of my anti-doping beliefs. She basically told me that in a way you won. Let's try to fight this and let's see what happens. I'm not gonna lie what I was a part of. I'm not gonna make up any political stories, and I will try to get as much evidence as I can, and I'll become completely clean with the World Anti-Doping Agency. So that's
how did you guys go about gathering that evidence?
My idea was be as simple as possible. It's at that time, 2012, when everybody starts having smartphones, which all have the possibility of recording. So no special equipment. So I just told Yulia, hold your phone in your hand and like everything is natural, and we'll just install a program on your phone that you can record things, even videos, without having your screen on. And that was the approach. Just go and talk to people about the usual stuff within the Russian Athletics Federation and to your athletes, coaches, and see where the conversations go.
And when you say record these conversations, you're talking about, it would give us a sense of this, because these are Olympic training camps. Are they not for the Russian team at this moment? What's the level of the officials that you're recording?
People that supposed to make sure that there is no doping going on, the medical personnel that instead actually they supply doping to athletes.
Yes.
Doctors, the head endurance coach of the national team.
So these are the very top level coaches in Russia, in the Russian Olympic infrastructure. This isn't like the PERM regional high school coach. These are the top guys.
Yes, the people that she knew on the personal level, the people that she had dealt with in the past, by getting to that top level, being a national champion and going to international competitions.
Vitaly, before we go right down the trail of what Yulia and you were able to uncover and the dangers that you had in that campaign, let's take a step back. For 3 years now, you've been writing to the World Anti-Doping Agency, desperate to blow the whistle. What was your reaction? What was that relationship like between 2009 and 2012?
It was my only hope. I believe that the organization is there, that has within the organization people that really try to fight doping. And so I went to these people because I thought they were honest people. And how did it go? since the Vancouver Olympics in March of 2010. I was writing to them. I had a few meetings as well with them. I was giving all the information that I have through about my wife, about my work at the Russian Anti-Doping Agency, about what I was seeing in general from my level. But there was often this impression that, first of all, this honest people, they don't know how to deal with the problem. They didn't expect this problem. And above all, the World Anti-Doping Code is not suitable for such problem, because again, according to the WADA code, if there is a problem, doping problem within a country, that problem must be referred to that country, and the country must deal with it. So basically, all the information that I was providing, WADA had to return back to the Russian Anti-Doping Agency and say, deal with it, fight doping.
Hang on, you mean you were providing information potentially to an international agency, World Anti-Doping Agency, and they would or could take that information and pass it back to the Russians, the Russian Anti-Doping Agency, the same guys that are actually running the doping program, and say, oh, by the way, you've got a problem. Somebody's telling us that this is the problem, so fix it.
Well,
that puts you in huge danger. Like, what's your reaction to that?
What? Well, back then I didn't understand many of these things.
Yes.
And again, I was seeing things from my 2-point low level of where I am.
Yes.
I felt that I'm not in the position to ask questions. All I can do, the best I can do, is to provide information and hope that these people at international, above Russia, on international level, can use that
and do the right thing. Yes.
Yes, and do the right thing. But I learned later, according to the WADA sports officials, that before 2015, according to the WADA code at that time, they couldn't even do anything with the information I had. But to me personally, they were saying, thank you for your information, and we are trying to deal with it.
But in reality, nothing was changing.
Well, in reality, the whole anti-doping structure failed thousands of global athletes around the world. I'd say for that period of time, from 2010 to 2015, when they had information, and not just from me, but from other people, and they didn't do anything. And then later they just said, we had a legal paper that said we couldn't do anything.
Which I guess is the reason why some of the more critical Olympic officials now are saying, if you were a clean athlete between at least 2010 and 2015, and you were competing against guys that could dope in all these different championships and all these different Olympics, and you were essentially cheated. You were defrauded out of your medal.
Correct. Yes. That's the reality. There was, in a way, there was no competition during those years, especially in track and field, and that was a failure by many people. Yes. Wow.
Before we jump to why and all the reasons behind Putin's drive for Sochi and the geopolitics of this, let's go back to you and Yulia. You've now decided to work together to gather evidence. How does that go? What do you do on that?
Well, the first thing Yulia did, she basically wrote a big statement to WADA, from explaining everything that she was doing, how she was being prepared in Russia.
Yes.
And what kind of prohibited substances she was using. She wrote it in Russian. I translated it to English. We sent this to the World Anti-Doping Agency. That was February of 2013.
What was in that statement?
Well, it was Yulia's statement saying how she was a young girl watching the Sydney Olympics, and seeing this Russian athletes as superheroes and thinking that she saw those athletes, and as the statement said, she was happy, she was proud, and she cried, and she felt this strength as as part of the country that those people are from. And that's how she starts the statement, basically by saying that she never dreamt that she might be one of those athletes who might be able to represent the country at the Olympic Games or World Championships. But later, step by step, she explains how she got to the point where she was able to compete at 2 World Championships. And the main point was that, unfortunately, she isn't a superhero, she's a cheat. And she regrets that, but she was also made to believe that that's the only way to go. And again, over the years, she saw that that's the only way to go, because there was cover-ups, there was support from the people that were supposed to fight doping. They actually supported doping, they sold doping to her. She named names. She step by step explained how she went from basically 2 minutes 10 seconds to running 1:56.99, which is a pretty good time for international level athletes, right, for 800-meter runner. And so how those time improvements were connected to doping usage. But at the same time, she was explaining that there were often times that her coaches were using her as a guinea pig. They didn't really know how she would react to doping. They didn't really know how to properly use it, but they still gave it to her because there is this goal and hope that maybe you can improve enough so you can compete at national level and you can win national competitions and go to international competitions so you can make money.
She was effectively their racehorse, their guinea pig. They were pumping her up with drugs that they hoped were going to make her fast, but they didn't really know what the long-term health effects would be.
Yes, and I believe that's the problem, not just with Russian coaches and officials. That's how it is with any country. Basically, pushing anybody to this extraordinary limits is, I believe, it's unhealthy. We just read this article in the Daily Mail earlier this week about the UK athletes doing the same thing prior to London Games, that they were giving a drink that supposedly was made for some military people, and nobody really knew what the effect is, but they figured it's London Games, we are hosting it, so let's give it to those English athletes, and some of them might vomit, some of them might have health effects, but maybe some of them will win a few gold medals for our country. We had one meeting with one person in March or April of 2013.
Yes.
But the problem is that later that year there is a big university games happening in Russia, in Kazan, which is a big sports event. There is also World Track and Field Championships in Moscow in the summer of 2013 as well. And in the beginning of 2014, there are Sochi Games. And there is this Yulia's statement that basically she is a part of the state-run doping program in the country, which is about to have this great sporting competitions. But I guess in a way, Wada felt that, she didn't really tell us anything new because her stupid husband told all of these things already in the past 3 years. So there's nothing really to do about it before this competitions happen. And after that, we'll see. But before the competitions, we cannot get our bosses, the International Olympic Committee, get upset with us. So we'll just, in a way, not do anything about it, and let's not bring any bad news to those major competitions in Russia.
And all the time that they're ignoring this, you and Yulia are continuing to gather evidence about what's going on. And I want to emphasize here for our listeners that Yulia is like hundreds of top athletes in Russia. She doesn't really have a choice. Like, she wants to compete, she's got to get with the program. She's got to get the dope into her system because she doesn't have that. It's not like, hey, you can be part of the program and not dope.
Well, you have a choice. You can be a part of it, or you find another job.
Okay.
And but in general, I'd say any elite athlete in any country who is able to make a living out of doing sports or playing sports are pretty lucky persons. So if a person has that opportunity, everybody would take that chance. And that's how it was offered to Yulia. You can be a part of this program, which allows you to cheat, which pays you well, which allows you to be employed by the Russian police or by the Russian army, and all you have to do is make sure you win your national championships, you go to international competitions, and you win medals there as well. And so in a way, it was a pretty well set up system behind the scenes. And of course, if you offered this, not many people would say, "Nah, I'll just find a job at some factory and I'm going to be a regular worker without seeing anything in the world and without having much future."
What happens to you personally? There's a bunch of questions I'm going to unpack later on in our interview about what you've just said, but what happens next? You're in 2013, the University Games, the World Championship, and then of course the Sochi Winter Olympics are about to happen. What happens with you and Yulia during that time? What do you guys do?
Well, the short statement is by the beginning of 2014, both of us understand that Yulia was right. and now not just I am the idiot, we are a family of idiots. And
Wow.
nobody is really fighting doping, and there are Olympics in Sochi. Who gives a damn about
these two crazy Russians that are telling everybody the truth inside WADA and nothing's happening?
Yeah, or about fair competition when the host country is offering to pay $50 billion to have those Olympics in a summer resort, have Winter Olympic Games. So that's the reality. I think a lot of sports officials, maybe even within WADA executive board, they were blinded by those billions of dollars.
Which and the Sochi Olympics.
So both of us, by the beginning of 2014, we've given up on doping fighting. Yes,
right.
There is as much as I've been informing WADA for 4 years. My wife joined me. She sanctioned Russians in the summer of 2013 in the World Athletics Championships. They won the most gold medals in the competitions. Did better than the U.S. athletes. So obviously, we are both seeing that the system is working, and there is no no place for people like us in it. Later, I would learn that these people are called whistleblowers.
But you didn't give up. I mean, that's what I find extraordinary about you, Vitaly, is that you keep fighting, even though it's the darkest point. You then do something else. You move to do something else, and you agree to do something else. Tell us about what you did.
Well, I'd say, I guess sometimes you put your life into, you don't try to plan too many things. You just live your life and see where it takes you. And that's how we approached it. And actually, a few weeks after the Olympics, Sochi Olympics in 2014, I received an email from Jack Robertson, who is at that time as a chief investigative officer at the World Anti-Doping Agency, who says simply, "I don't think WADA can do much with the information that you have, but here's this German investigative journalist, Hajo Seppelt.
Yes.
Talk to him, and maybe you can make something happen together with him, and kind of keep WADA out of it."
And again, Vitaly, you got a choice at that moment. In 2014, you could have just said, "Hey, thanks. I've done what I'm supposed to do. I've done what I get paid to do. I've told WADA. They haven't done anything. Okay, I'm out of here." But you don't do that. You continue with the German journalist. What happens?
Well, Yulia and we just had a baby, our son Robert, in November of 2013. So that's a few months later. So obviously, anti-doping is not our top priority at that point.
Yes.
And we never really got the impression that it is even a top priority for anti-doping officials. So we didn't feel that we were any different from most of the other people. So I get this email, and one night we are laying in bed with my wife and our son next to us, and I become brave enough, and I say, I said we move on from this thing. But I remember this guy we met with last year in April. He wrote to us, and he wants us to speak to a journalist. And her first reaction was like, "Wow, you're really not getting any smarter." But we had all night ahead of us, so I convinced her that let's talk, because throughout those years I said I don't know what's really going on behind the scenes, who is really fighting and who is covering up doping use, but if I have the opportunity to, in a way, to help clean athletes to compete on a level playing field, and hopefully some of them can win in an honest way, and they can be good heroes for our children, I tried to do that. So that was always something that I was coming back to, basically saying in a way I made a promise to myself, if I get the opportunity to fight for something right, something I loved doing sports and making it better, I would do it, even if life is taking me in a different direction.
It's difficult, however, just to be the devil's advocate, not to feel some sympathy for Yulia, who's lying in bed with this crazy guy that for 5 years now, ever since your first date, she's been like, idiot, like, come on, get with the program. Everybody else is cheating. The guys who are supposed to be stopping the cheating are running the cheating. The heads of the Russian anti-doping agency are doing this. Our political masters behind us. You've done the right thing. You've gone to the World Anti-Doping Agency, and they basically now said, for whatever reason, look, there's nothing we can do. Go to a journalist. And you still write to that German journalist. What happens then? What happens next?
So Jack Robertson puts me and Hajo Seppelt in touch. Hajo Seppelt just did a small piece on Russian athletes supposedly doping in Sochi. I forgot the exact topic of his work, but he started working in Russia, and that's the reason he approached WADA. He said, "Do you have any more people?" And I guess WADA said, "Yeah, well, maybe." There's a crazy family you can talk to, an anti-doping official who got fired, and who's who has a wife who is a doper, and you can talk to them. He became interested. He came to our apartment in Russia. We spoke for about an hour. Then it was time to feed our son, Robert. So Yulia went to a different room. So I followed her. I said, "So what do you think about this guy?" And she said, "I kind of like him. Nice, crazy German journalist. Maybe we can connect." So I said, "So should we give him your statement that you wrote to WADA more than a year ago about everything that you know?" And she said, "Yeah, you go ahead. It's kind of you lead, I follow. It's so I can blame you if things don't work out."
Right.
So I go back to Hajo and I give him the this statement. He starts reading the statement, and a few minutes later, he comes back to me and he says, "This is like East Germany in the 80s. Only it's happening now in Russia." And yes, I'm interested.
I'm still, you know, Vitaly, you and I have known each other for years, but there are details coming up in this conversation, and I still find it extraordinary that after 5 years of trying to blow the whistle, you've now got a young son, a baby son. Most people would have just said, you know what, I'm done. You know, I've done the best thing I've done. Because we've also skipped over, I realized in this thing that you've been fired from Rusada because they figured out that you're whistleblowing on them and you're a good guy. Like you've really paid a heavy price at this moment, but now you are going to go and do an extraordinary interview, an interview that blows really it wide open, this whole scale, because you and Hayo do a documentary together, which exposes everything that you've been saying. What was the effect of that documentary on your life?
Well, again, in our approach, it was always, take one step at a time, do what you can, and don't plan. In fact, there is a saying in Russia: if you want to make God smile, tell him your plans.
Yes.
In a way, I personally, in my life, and that doesn't say good things about me and my planning skills, but in fact, I know if I plan something, most likely it's not going to happen. So it's like don't plan it. Just do the best you can and see where it takes you.
You're being modest here, because this isn't just a plan. This is an expose of corruption at the heart of one of the world's biggest sporting teams, a deliberately constructed corruption. So you're being very modest, Vitaly. But I'm interested in the world reaction after that documentary. I mean, did you and Yulia fear for your lives?
Well, when I spoke to Hayo, I told him one of the conditions for the documentary to be aired, when it happens, I don't want to be in Russia because we have a small child, and I want to be out of Russia, and I want to have the ability to work and to make some money. So there's enough financial support.
Understood. But what are you afraid of from the Russians? What do you think is going to happen to you?
Well, I didn't want to find out.
You're right.
Yes. So that was always the approach, at least for me. If you feel that there might be a tense situation ahead of you, avoid it. Especially when you decide to fight something openly, when you feel that you've gained enough evidence behind the scenes and you can go public with it, and there is really nothing to discuss with this unethical, and probably you can even call them criminals, at least sports criminals. There is nothing to talk about with these people if you're trying to fight them. What their reaction would be for possibly losing their jobs, losing their careers, for the fact that somebody accusing them that all this Russian superpower is it's pretty fake. It's not because the athletes themselves they're some kind of superheroes and super strong. It's simply because they cheat, and there are people around them that help them cheat, and the Ministry of Sports, the governmental structure, is completely aware of that, and they actually set up a doping system within the Russian Ministry of Sports, not just within the anti-doping agency, but on the governmental level as well. So I didn't think anybody's going to thank us for what we say, so I wanted to avoid those conversations. And the second part was, if there is some kind of investigation after that, after we go public, I just didn't see that I'd be able to provide freely all the evidence that we have, because within the Russian territory, I thought that probably the next day, some FSB officials or some other people, even without having their badges, would show up and would tell you,
Some very bad things. Yeah.
yeah, you weren't smart, which I was aware. But the second part would have been, you better stop and
Yes.
give us what you have. And obviously, I didn't want to have that conversation.
So you get out of the country, you take your young son, you take your wife, and you go into hiding. We won't discuss where you are in the world, but you're still in hiding 5 years later.
Well, this part is not really. We were in Germany for almost 1 year, and then we moved to the United States of America. For the past 5 years, we are in the U.S. in almost
Right.
Almost 4 years ago, we applied
Yeah.
for asylum here, and we are currently waiting for the American authorities to schedule an interview date with us. So somebody, an immigration officer, would talk to us and see if we have an asylum case.
Right. Well, I can't think of a better, frankly, I can't think of a better asylum case. There was, after this expose documentary on German television, there was a multiplicity of reports. There was the Schmidt report by the International Olympic Committee. There were 2 reports by Richard McLaren and by Richard Pound. But the basic summation of all those reports is that you were right. The evidence that you and Yulia had gathered was right, and that everything that you're saying in this interview is correct, that there was a state-sponsored doping scheme at the very heart of the Russian Olympic team, linked to the FSB, the Russian Secret Service, and linked to Russian government officials. After you now, 2020, as we talk now, what do you think, Vitaly, about this journey and what you've done? Do you regret doing it? Do you have a sense that you shouldn't have done it, or are you proud that you did it?
Again, this is you just live one day at a time. We don't know if we would be able to stay in the place where we are at now, and that would be, in a way, I guess, the conclusion of our somewhat journey with trying to fight doping in sports. If we are allowed to stay in the US, I guess, and maybe it's not even completely connected, but for our life, just daily life, that's important. We made the step, we left the country, we don't feel safe going back.
Yes.
But and for the past 4 years, we've been waiting to be scheduled for an interview with American authorities, and whenever that may happen, if we are interviewed and we are told, we don't give you asylum in the US, you have to leave the country, then we just have to continue the journey and trying to find another place to live at. But in general, I believe, if I could go back, would I do it again? Yes. Would I do something differently? Yes, I would. I would have. Both of us would have gotten more evidence. Would have had more evidence earlier. And I don't think competitions like Moscow World Championships in track and field or Sochi Olympics would have been that badly messed up if people started acting sooner.
How do your families who live in Russia, how do your family and Yulia's family in Russia, how do they react to you guys? It's a tough question. I know there's been some stuff, we talked about this, but please tell our listeners.
I don't think Yulia's part of the family ever really liked me or what I tried to stand for. In a way, I took away their daughter in a way, whom they haven't seen for more than 5 years now, almost 6 years now. With my family, I can say that the propaganda, the media propaganda works. It works really well. My father likes to watch TV, and in a way, he believes the TV and not me. I tried to make an argument with him a few times. I said, "Do you remember all those times when I was with Indrosada? I was coming to you, coming back to the hometown, and I was telling you what I was seeing and how terrible things are. And we are, instead of being anti-doping agency, we are a doping agency."
Yes.
And his argument is, but the TV says, but the TV in Russia says, and so about 3 or 4 years ago, I stopped even talking about this topic. We all have different opinions, and we all stand up for different things.
And just to be clear, the TV in Russia is calling you Judas. It's calling you traitor. It's calling you all these things, is it?
Yes, and that everything was prearranged, and again, Western people from the Western world, mainly English-speaking countries, they are afraid of Russians. They know that Russians are stronger, but they cannot compete with them on the level playing field in competitions. So they try to use World Anti-Doping Agency to get rid of those superhumans from Russia, so Westerners can compete against themselves.
And this is what your father is believing against his own son. There's another thing that you and I have spoken about, and that is the film Icarus, which won the Academy Award 2 years ago. And that portrays a guy who was at the head of the Russian anti-doping agency as a hero, as a whistleblowing guy who revealed everything. Tell me your views on that, please.
Well, Dr. Rodchenkov, who was the head of the Moscow anti-doping lab for a long period of time,
yes,
in the end of 2015, he left Russia. He fled to the U.S. in the summer of, in actually late spring of 2016. He openly became a whistleblower, just like us, telling everything that he knows. So in the big picture, I'm thankful for the fact that he went public with everything that he knows, because that was our hope, that if we start talking, maybe somebody else starts talking. And in a way, he became our teammate, in a way. And if you look for a teammate fighting doping and for a whistleblower who can tell you things, the head of the anti-doping lab who was running doping programs may be your best teammate.
Okay.
So in the big picture, it's the reality. I thank him for what he did. And if you take smaller parts, the Icarus documentary, how things became public, I disagree with that, because I believe the Icarus documentary makers, they had the goal of winning Oscars and of making money as their top priority, and fighting doping was their not the top priority, and that was, I guess, somewhat different from my views. And that was partially why in spring of 2016, when I started talking to Dr. Rodchenkov in Skype, and when he tells me openly, "Oh, I'm working on this great documentary, and it's going to win Oscars," and again, 2 years later, it actually wins Oscars. So actually, some people are good at planning. But when I learned that, so in a way, that's the top priority of documentary makers, find the best time to go public with everything he knows with this documentary, sell it to Netflix or whoever buys it. And there are Rio games ahead of us. And there are also World Anti-Doping Agency, who is behind the scenes aware that Dr. Rodchenkov fled, and he's talking, but in a way sitting again on the information and not willing to do anything about it, because they don't want to get the International Olympic Committee upset right before Rio Games, because again, that's negative publicity for the Olympics. And that's when I felt that, okay, for the past 3 years, I asked my wife to make the recordings and then, reuse it as the initial step of the evidence. well, maybe in a way, now I'll be the person who makes the recordings and who goes public with it. And again, it wasn't as dangerous because it was just Skype conversations, but 15 hours of Skype conversations with the anti-doping lab director,
Right.
who admits that he ran the doping program. I thought that maybe that can lead to another investigation. So that's when 60 Minutes happened. And obviously 60 Minutes, like a few days before they go public, they go to Rodchenkov and they tell him, do you want to say something to us? And my view is that the documentary makers, they felt that maybe we leave the TV people, the people that watch the TV, out of it for now, and maybe we just go to newspapers for now.
Right.
But in general, we cannot. We have to say something because we want to be credible.
Hang on, but I don't want to get into their mindsets. I just want to get into what you know about you and Yulia, and that is that this guy at the center of the Icarus documentary was running the program. And I remember seeing your anger at him being betrayed in a public sphere at the Play the Game conference as a hero who'd done this. And you guys had been the whistleblowers from the beginning, who had risked your life, your career, and everything to do this.
Well, again, this was a disagreement between me and Yulia. She was the part of the doping program, and in a way there are also negative health effects to that. So she was angrier with Dr. Rodchenkov, and we were sitting actually next to Brian Fogel.
Yes.
I was angrier with Brian Fogel because I felt that he took the truth, and to make it more interesting, he exaggerated it. So I didn't agree with that approach, even though I understand that he's from the show business and that's how it works. Well, in a way, you lie to make more attention. But in the big picture, we are thankful to Dr. Rodchenkov that he went public, and I hope that he was completely honest with everything that he did in the past, just like my wife was.
Yes. Let's wrap up our conversation, and I really want to thank you, and I know that our listeners want to thank you both for taking the time, because this has been pretty intense conversation, Vitaly, with a lot of emotion and a lot of stuff where you're really pulling it up. Let me finish with this question. What would you say to an athlete or a sports official right now in 2020 who faces the same kind of challenges, be it in China, be it in, whatever country of the world that is carrying on this kind of doping? What advice would you give, or America or Canada or Europe, or, what advice would you give to that athlete or that sports official that really wants to make a difference?
I guess in a way I prefer not to give any kind of advice. But if you strongly believe in that you're right and there is something wrong going on, you can make a difference. You can try to fight it, and you will find support. There are people that fight for the right cause, and the investigative journalists like yourself might be your biggest supporters, at least.
Do you think in the sports infrastructure, let's leave aside investigative journalists like myself and Hayo and these other guys, is the sports infrastructure better now in 2020 than it was in 2010, or has nothing changed?
Yes, I believe it's better. Yes.
Okay.
At least the WADA code now says that if there is a problem within a certain country, WADA can investigate. Yes. They don't have to send that information back to the country who is cheating.
Vitaly, thank you very much for your time this morning. Thanks very much for sharing with our listeners this time. I'm kind of flabbergasted. I don't have any more questions, or I have too many. We could be talking for 3 hours. But thank you both for your time today, and also for your work. You are a genuine hero. I think our listeners will agree at all this difficulty that has come up, and I really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for listening.
This is Declan. Just a word to say thank you for listening to the interview with Vitaly. If you'd like any more information about his story and how you can support him in any way, please go to our website. And please, on social media, do the usual. Subscribe or like us. It's hugely appreciated.